So tonight's class is going to be focused mostly on the hamstring family, although because everything's connected, you're probably going to feel some awareness around other muscles around your hip complex and potentially into your low back. So hamstrings are a muscle group very near and dear to my life, just because I've experienced some injuries and then awesomely have gotten through those injuries with a little bit of strengthening and really diligent attention to mobility. So I'm going to introduce some of that stuff to you tonight. Some of it may not be new to you, especially if you've been practicing with me. We are going to need a handful of things tonight. A blanket or a towel or even socks. If you have a slippery floor and you can slide on that, that's great. If you have carpet, paper plates work really well, so that's a good choice. Yoga blocks are always a good idea no matter what, even if we're not specifically using them. It's just nice to have them on hand. A strap or a bathrobe tie or something long like that, we'll need that. And then some sort of a ball, lacrosse ball, tennis ball, therapy ball, even one of those small rubber super balls. So if you don't have all that stuff, let's go grab it. I want to make sure I have my notes. And then I'm going to go ahead and mute everyone's microphone. But if you need to, you can always ask me a question. If you have music queued up, go ahead and press play on that and just make yourself comfortable in a seated position. And I will vary my position from forward facing to side facing, but you just make yourself comfortable on your mat. I don't necessarily need to see you. If you want me to see you, cool, but it's not required. And we're going to start right away with a little bit of myofascial release using the ball. So it's a little bit tricky to get the hamstrings in this way, especially if your ball is soft. So I'm going to show you a couple different ways that I found to make it a little bit more intense. The first thing that I'm going to do is make a little platform for my hips to come up just a little bit. That's completely optional. And then you're going to wedge your ball right in the belly of your hamstrings, sort of right in the center. And we'll open up the knee all the way so our knee is nice and straight. And just kind of press down into that ball with your leg. So you can just feel that it's there, and it doesn't have to be overly intense. In fact, it's better if it's not. You just want to feel that there's something underneath in the muscle. And if you had a foam roller as an alternative to a ball, that would be fine too. I'm sorry I forgot to mention that, but that's a choice too. And then once you get that ball in the belly of your hamstrings, you're going to start to pivot so that you are rolling on the inner border of your heel and then on the outer border of your heel. So I'm going to show you that from the front so you know what that looks like. So I have my ball kind of centered, and then I'm just rotating my thigh bone across that ball, just so I can kind of feel that it's there. And I'm actually tipping forward slightly. You don't need to do that. You could actually lean back a little bit if you want to. And then move your ball down just a little bit, just a few inches, so it's a little bit closer to your knee. And once again, press down into that ball. And then you can dial the leg a little bit outward, a little bit inward. You could also actually do this sitting in a chair. You might get a little more pressure into your hamstrings that way if you wanted it. And then let's move the ball up a little higher. We don't want it right in the attachment point, but above where you have that kind of bump of the hamstrings muscle. And we'll do the same thing, just a little bit of rotation in that femur bone. If you're not feeling a whole lot, one thing you could try is to put a hard book or a yoga block, raise up your hips, and then put more of your body weight down on that tennis ball. And for this one, we're actually going to roll vertically. So rolling from just above the knee, whoops, lost my ball, and then up towards the pelvis without getting too close. So maybe that path is only, I don't know, 4 or 5 inches. And as you're rolling front to back, let's also start to rotate the thigh bone, dialing it inward and rolling a few times. Woo. And then rotating your thighs slightly outwards. I don't spend a whole lot of time on this rolling. So if you're still kind of working out this first side, continue at your own pace, but we are going to start to move on to that other leg. So I'm going to take away the block for now. Start easy. A little bit more tenderness. Center the ball right in the meaty part of your hamstrings muscle. Put as much or as little pressure there as you want to, and then start to roll side to side, almost like you're doing windshield wipers with that thigh bone. This side feels like guitar strings for me, so I'm going a little bit easier than I did on the first side, a little less pressure. Don't want to make ourselves wince or cause any real discomfort here. Lower your ball a little bit so it's slightly closer to the knee, hitting just a slightly different area. And then as you keep your pelvis set, once again, spin the thigh bone inward and outward. Now we'll send it a little higher. Same. And then optionally, you are going to use that yoga block underneath so that there's just more pressure as you raise the hips, but you're totally fine to not use the block and just raise the hips and pull and push forward and back along the length of your hamstrings. Ooh, I've got some tender spots on this one, especially when I turn my thigh inward. Interesting. Wonder what that's about. So avoid any sharp electrical pain or kind of radiating pain, and you're just going to try to keep it just that nice muscular massage sensation. Just a couple more passes and then we'll be done with the rolling. And if you missed some of that, don't worry about it. You can set your ball off to the side. And then we're going to work through more of a passive stretch. So this would be something that you would probably find in a yin yoga class. I'm going to take away all my supports underneath me except my yoga mat. Have my strap handy. And then come down to the floor. So ideally in this set for tonight, we're going to work on getting a straight leg, even if that means our leg is lower like this. So lasso your foot, give yourself as much slack on that strap as you need to, and try to create a position with your strap and your arms and your shoulders that will allow you to not have to work so hard in the arms. So I have kind of this big loop here, and then I'm just holding the ends and kind of wrapping them once around my wrist so that I can get my upper arm bones down to the ground. So we would rather have the leg straight and the leg lower on a diagonal versus having the leg higher and bending the knee, at least for today. So try to find what feels like just the very edge of a stretch without making it too intense. And then just think of pulling your leg directly back into the hip socket. So kind of a grounding sensation. And that's not to say we're pulling our leg any closer. It's just kind of snuggling it in. As if you could, with your own strength, secure the head of your femur inside that hip capsule, which probably isn't even possible. So this is more of just you creating a mind-body connection in that way. And then with the left leg, it could be all the way straight, it could be bent, or it could even be propped up on a yoga block or two. Because the position of that leg is going to impact how your back might feel in this. And if you feel like your back is kind of lifting up off the ground in the lumbar area, you might be better off with the bent position or the elevated position. If you can't get your leg straight where you are, go ahead and lower it a few degrees until you can open up the back of your knee. And hey, if it doesn't go all the way straight, no sweat. But what happens is with this knee opening position is we are more evenly distributing the stretch across the entire length of the hamstrings. And when we bend the knee a little bit, that kind of targets those high hamstrings where they connect to your pelvis. And that can sometimes be a little bit overwhelming for those tendons. And they might kind of resent that extra load. So that's why tonight we're going with the straight knee. Let's take just a handful more breaths here in this one. And then nice and slow, go ahead and bend that right knee, unlasso your foot, and just set your right foot on the ground with your knee bent. I'm just going to take it easy for a few breaths. You can let go of that strap so your hands can take a break from holding. Here we can really center the focus on our breathing. Breathing into the back a little bit, feeling those back ribs heavy and connected to the floor. And even imagining that our breath could get a little bit broader out to the east and the west, side ribs. Still noticing the belly rising and falling slightly without it becoming a big balloon. Now using either your ball or a rolled up hand towel or washcloth, we're going to tuck that ball behind the right knee. And you're just going to squeeze onto that ball. And you might feel a little bit of pressure, like a trigger point, even in your calf area, depending on the size and the hardness of your ball. We're just trying to get the hamstrings to work now to flex the knee. And if you don't have the ball, no sweat, you can just squeeze behind your knee with your muscles. Now stretch your right leg all the way to the ground. You aren't going to need your ball, but keep it nearby. Right leg all the way down. Press your right heel into the floor. And then as you bend your knee slightly, imagine you were trying to drag your mat towards your bum without actually doing that. Pressing down with the heel at the same time, kind of scrubbing your heel isometrically towards your tush. And your knee's going to bend just a few degrees. Continue to monitor how your trunk position is. So we're looking for more neutral curves of the spine, keeping the low back from curling up or arching any more than it naturally does. And then we're going to repeat that series with the same leg. So loop your foot. Find your end range of stretch on the back side of your thigh as you maintain a straight knee, or as straight as you can make it today. Noticing if you can get maybe just 1 or 2 more degrees of movement as those hamstrings lengthen. And there might be a temptation here to try to kind of push yourself. Don't do that. Just kind of tease your edge. Let's take about 2 more breaths in this passive reach with the leg. And then free up your foot, bend your knee, plant your foot down on the ground and just pause for a moment. And then tuck that ball or whatever object you have handy behind your knee and give it a nice tight squeeze. You could even imagine that you were trying to juice an orange. That's a visual I quite like for this particular skill. And then that final layer, stretch your right leg down. Open the leg all the way. Press your heel down into the ground at the same time as you think about drawing it back, and that's going to bend your knees a few degrees, or bend your right knee a few degrees. And then while you're doing that, squeeze your right butt cheek. Give it a nice tight hug there on the back of your hip. And then just let go and relax. Allow your body to find a shape that's appealing to you before we do that second side. You might even drop your eyes closed for just a few breaths. And then let's move on. Left leg gets the strap lasso. Right leg can be bent or straight or supported by an object. And I am actually going to do that on this side. I'm going to work until I can get my left knee all the way open, and then maintain my neutral position of pelvis and back. And find a pause. Notice the continuous flow of your breath energy as your body enjoys some time in stillness. It's completely normal for your mind to wander in these poses, in these shapes. And you can do that But what we're after here is more of an observation and less dialogue. Almost like you're just watching those thoughts instead of contributing to them. It's probably the hardest skill in yoga. Remember when we were trying to call to our minds this idea of setting the leg bone back inside the hip. Almost as if you were trying to pull your leg bone straight back into the ground. And then you may set your strap off to the side momentarily, rebend your leg, plant your left foot on the ground, and just soften in for a moment. Grasp onto the ball with the space behind your knee. And then give it a squeeze. Release left leg all the way to the ground. Firmly plant your heel down. And then connecting to the effort of trying to drag your mat towards you. Your knee is going to bend a few degrees. I'm just going to keep that energy. Maintain a calming cycle of breathing. A simple inhale through the nose. Don't have to overdo it. And then a really smooth and polished, patient exhale breath through the nose. We'll move on to our second round. First, lasso the foot. Maybe you have a new position now for that leg. It's also fine to revisit that first spot. Set your strap off to the side, find your ball, give it a little squeeze back behind your knee. And then the last round of the mostly open leg position. First step is to press heel downward. Second step is to create the effort of pulling your heel to your tush. but not actually doing it. Just a few degrees. And then add in that glute squeeze, just the left glutes. Can you give them a little squeeze? Sometimes it's hard to do just one side. So if you can't do just one, it's totally fine to do both. And then relax, let go. Adjust until your body feels like in a good position for a little bit of stillness and a direct focus on breathing rhythm. Okay, let's get our legs both to go up vertically. Now, if you feel like you're having a hard time doing that, one thing you could try, I'll demonstrate this first and then I'm probably gonna just take it away, but one thing you could try is to create a little shim for your hips, not in your back, but right at the sacrum, and then take your legs up. So it's basically reverse process, but we're not using the wall, although that would be real nice. I keep threatening to do a wall class, and I am going to do that, maybe next week. Okay, so from this position, let's stretch the legs as straight as they'll go. And then try to pull your toes towards your shin bones as you stretch your heels to the sky. And then as you bend your knees, try to close them all the way, just like you did when you had that ball. And then point your toes forward and squeeze. Yes, excellent. Reverse out, straighten your legs until they stop, and pull your toes towards your nose. Try to fully extend open so your legs are arrow straight. Once again, bend your knees as you point through your toes. Really squeeze. Try to squeeze all the juice out of the oranges behind your knees, nice and tight. You're going to do 2 more like that. I think you have the gist of it. Final repetition. Travel slowly between the 2. All right, next up, we're going to be laying on our side for this one. So if you wanted to, you could just take a look at how I'm going to arrange myself so you don't have to crane your neck so much, but it's totally fine just to follow along. You will need something for underneath your head, just so that your neck can stay comfy through this. And then you're probably going to want a yoga block or another blanket or some sort of an object out in front of you eventually. I'm just going to set that off to the side so you can see. As you lay on your side, you're going to be on the right side, right shoulder, right side of the head. We'll begin with the legs in this bent position so the knees travel straight forward to the pelvis, and then your spine is arranged so that it feels like you're leaning your back straight up against a wall. The bottom leg, your right leg, is going to be your grounding leg. So you're going to constantly be trying to pressure down into the floor with the right hip and the outside of the right ankle. And then we're going to move this left hip like a giant bicycling motion, when our knee is all the way bent, our leg is going to be kicking behind us. So it's almost like you're trying to put your footprint on the wall behind you as you close the knee. And then as you guide your leg forward in space, you're going to continue to reach your tailbone backwards, straighten your leg, and open up your knee all the way as you point your toe straight out ahead of your hip. Bend your knee, give it a good squeeze, and then move into hip extension. Connect to the glutes here. Try not to bend your back, but rather just open the front of that left hip all the way. Drag that knee back out in front of you and fully extend at the knee. Hold here. You can point or flex your ankle. It really doesn't matter. And we're going to continue with that cycle. The slowest motion you can make. Squeeze behind the knee and then kick the heel backwards. Pull your leg forward in space and get your leg nice and straight. The further you take that leg forward, the more stretch you might feel in your hamstrings. And then when you take the leg behind you and you really squeeze behind your knee, the more connection you might feel at the glute hamstring junction. Let's do maybe 3 more. Keep pressing down with the bottom leg hip. I'm going to go for 1 more. And the next time you find that top leg stretching out in front of you, this is where you might want your support system. It can really be anything. It could be a stack of books. You're just going to set your foot, your ankle, your leg on that support system and just kind of relax here. Your bottom leg could stay bent like this, but if you're more comfortable straightening it, that works too. And then we're just going to chill here for a little bit. Create a bit more softness around the jaw and the muscles around your eyes, your face, your cheekbones, around the temples. I sometimes even like to think about my scalp softening and relaxing. And as I transition to the other side, let's meet back in that vertical leg position on our backs. We're going to make this one a little fancier. So instead of just bending and straightening the legs, we're going to move into almost like a swimming flow with the legs. So with the feet about hip width, dial your legs into external rotation. So your toes start to point outward, but the heels stay centered over your hips. And then bend your knees. When your knees bend all the way, take your knees together and let your feet pivot wide. And then straighten your legs. Now your toes are pointing towards each other. Let's do that again. Dial the legs outward. And then bend your knees. Heels might meet. Pivot the knees together. Feet fan apart. And then stretch your legs straight. One more in that direction and then we'll switch it. And then we'll go the other way. Start vertical, pivot your toes inward, trying to think about turning your kneecaps towards each other. Bend your knees. And then start to turn the thighs outward as the heels come together, the knees go apart. Straighten your legs. Continue, turn the feet in, bend, rotate out, straighten the legs. Last one, internal, bend, external, extend straight. And then let's get resituated on the left side. I have to move my water bottle so I don't kick it over when I reach my leg back. Remember, you want that block somewhere out in front of you for that final step in the puzzle. Arrange yourself so you've got your knees forward of the hips and your back pretty straight. Kind of like a sideline sleeping position without being so curled up into a ball. That's super comfy though. Okay, so let's begin by lifting the right leg just a little bit and then kicking it straight forward of your hip. Trying to maximize that stretch on the back side of the thigh. Bend your knee. Bring your leg back behind you without bringing it into your back. So it's just that hip that moves. Find your glutes. Draw it forward. Make your leg as straight as it'll go. You can point or flex through the ankle. The further forward you take your leg, the more tension you're going to be placing on the back side of your thigh. Squeeze behind your knee and kick back. I like to think of moving through heavier air and slow like you're underwater. Really being supportive and conscious throughout this whole range of motion. Continue to move at your own pace. Trying to find those end ranges where you're really feeling the effort of contracting the hamstrings as the legs go back, leg goes back, And then also lengthening the hamstrings as your leg shoots forward. Let's do at least one more. You can do a couple if you want. We want to get to the point where we're starting to feel just a little bit of fatigue. That's when we know we're making some progress here. Progress in the sense that the muscles are really doing their job. And then after your final repetition, you will situate yourself so your leg can rest on something, and it could be on the floor. It doesn't have to be elevated. But do try to get it so that your hip and your knee and your ankle are at least about in the same line, if not even pulling that right leg a touch higher to maximize that stretch. And then I'm going to set my timer in, and we're just going to hang out. Observe breathing. Don't worry about your form being any certain way. We're not after perfection here. We're simply after comfort in the shape that we're in. And that is purely subjective. It's your experience. We'll have just a handful of breaths here. Finishing off this particular sequence before moving on to what I feel like is kind of the highlight of the practice, but you can be the judge of that. All right, let's escape this position. And then it's going to take just a little bit of doing to get ready for the next thing. You're going to need something to slide on. So what I'm going to do, and what I would recommend you do, so that you can get to that sliding, is to fold your mat on itself in half. Or at least maybe thirds, okay? And then you're gonna need either your socks or a slippery blanket, or if you're on your carpet, you're gonna need your paper towels or your furniture sliders. Okay, and then you're gonna set your tush on the edge of that mat. And I'm gonna move my dog once again, so he's out of the way. Okay. Here's the skill. I'll show you first and then you can join in. I happen to be starting on my left leg, but you don't have to do that. See how I have my heel on that blanket? Because I'm going to be pulling and pushing the weight of the blanket, that's going to task my hamstrings even more. Since I have socks on, actually, I could actually do this without the blanket, and I'll show you that way first. Right leg is going to be bent, set on the floor, pelvis level. Left foot is going to be down and slightly outward, okay? And we're going to try to keep the back and the trunk all nice and neutral. As you press your heel down, you're also going to drag it and slide it back towards your tush, squeezing behind your knee. And then you're going to let that leg turn inward for hip internal rotation without lifting the pelvis up. And then send your leg straight. And then roll the leg open again. Hip external rotation. Slide and pull it in. Turn it in, internal rotation, so it's getting closer to your right leg, and then extend it straight. Does that make sense? I hope. I'm going to show you a little faster. You can kind of see this movement. It's the exact same thing that we did up here with those little froggy swimmer legs, but we're just doing one leg at a time. And if you use the blanket or the towel, you're going to be adding just a little extra work for those hamstrings as they push and pull the blanket towards your body and away from your body. And then you're just going to play around with how many of these you want to do. And what I'd also think would be really beneficial is to do a few in this order and then kind of reverse that order. So starting with the leg extended and the toes turning in, then we bend and slide towards us. Once we max that out, then we can open the hip and extend the leg straight again. So you could alternate, you could do like a handful each way and then switch. I'm going to try to get to a level of awareness in the hamstrings that you start to feel just that hint of fatigue sneaking in. Pulling and pushing, opening and closing the knee, contracting the hamstrings, and then trying to get them to stretch a little bit as your leg opens up. You might also feel a sense of how your glutes are supporting this flow, this organization. And potentially you'll have some stuff happening around the ankle too. Let's do maybe 5 more or so. Depending on how fast you're going, that might be more or less. And when you feel like you've just had enough of that, you can find a position to reset yourself. I'm going to pull that blanket underneath my upper thighs and just lay my legs straight for a little bit. Handful of breaths. And let's finish it off. Moving to the second side. Left leg can just be a kickstand. Feel that your pelvis is fairly well balanced and level from side to side. And think about breathing kind of into those natural spine curves all the way around your core container. Start with your leg all the way extended with a slight turnout. And then drag that blanket towards your seat. Once you can't go any further, turn the hip inward and extend your leg. And then keep it rolling, keep it sliding and gliding. You don't want to go overly fast here. Just find a pace that feels kind of moderate. You're not rushing it, but you're still creating this flow of movement. It's smooth. One movement just turns into the next. I'm going to do a few without my blanket. feel like I get better rotation without it, but a little more challenge in my hamstrings with it. Remember, you can reverse it and go the other way. Let's finish off our last few repetitions. And then you're going to move right into what you feel like is a really good body position for rest and recovery. As I mentioned earlier, I like to have that blanket folded up and underneath my thighs. Some people like it behind their knees, that's good too. Some folks like to have something over their eyes. And then you're going to set your arms either down on your trunk, maybe hands to belly or ribs, or your arms could also just be laying down beside your body. Let's tuck the shoulders down underneath us a little bit. Drop your eyes closed. Let your inhales be organic, maybe focusing on slightly more volume for a breath or two. But more importantly, observe the patience in the exhale breath. Allow that air to trickle out real slow through your nose. Take your rest. Please remain rooted in your stillness and your rest physically. And bring your attention to the back side of your thighs. Land your attention to the space just behind your knees. And then travel up to about mid-thigh, where the largest, most prominent portion of your hamstrings are. Feel an expansiveness there as you inhale, and a letting go and a softness as you exhale. Using our creative mind here to touch the hamstrings with our breath. And then move your awareness to the uppermost portion of the back of your thigh where it connects to your seat. And imagine your breath to be soothing you there. Steady waves of breath. The inhales rolling into the exhales. And perhaps a soft pause after the exhale before you invite a new breath in. Feel the weight of your pelvis and just let yourself be. And then generate a hug on the backside of your pelvis with your glutes. Give them a moderate hug, a little bit of a squeeze back there, and then let them go. And then maybe just try the right side. Feel how your pelvis tips a little bit. And then soften the right, squeeze the left. And alternate once again. And continue to move back and forth. Right side, left side, doing a little dance. And you could start to integrate some other movements as well, coming out of your rest in a way that feels a little bit lazy and unrushed. Perhaps you turn the head, windshield wiper your legs with your knees bent, or stretch your body all the way out like a good morning stretch with arms reaching overhead. Keep your eyes closed for as long as you can. And then roll to one side and cradle your head with the bottom arm. Draw your knees up towards your body and let your spine curl. You can remain there in the fetal pose for as long as you like. And when you decide you're ready, only you'll know. And you can come up to either a seated position or you can kneel. And I encourage you, once you do get upright, to not get too fussy with your posture. Sometimes we can get a sense of rigidity because we think we're supposed to sit in a certain way and our posture is supposed to look a certain way. Let's be a little more interested in accepting our natural posture, whatever that is today, without any force or manipulation. Simply allowing ourselves to sit. And be very curious about our breathing here in this new shape. I'm going to close class with a mantra that I use from time to time. You can feel free to borrow it for as long as you like. My body is strong and resilient. My mind is calm and connected. My heart is open and grateful. I am whole. Thank you for being here and practicing with me, for taking care of yourselves. I know sometimes it's hard to make time for this stuff, but we never regret it. It's my honor to guide you. Namaste.